To determine the domain and range from a formula, imagine its graph first and see if that helps. For instance, any sloped line of the form mx plus b can easily be graphed onto the xy plane, and determining its domain and range from the graph is simple. Exercise A. What is the domain of the line L of x equals mx plus b, where m does not equal 0? So this line here, what's the domain and what's the range? Well, the domain is all real numbers because it just goes on forever, and if you project this onto the x-axis, that would include every single number on the x-axis, and the range is also all real numbers because if you project this onto the y-axis, you would also hit every single value on the y-axis. So here we have the domain. X belongs to all real numbers, which I tend to draw like that, and the range, L of x, belongs to all real numbers as well. It's a good practice to imagine at first that the set of all real numbers, R, is the domain of a function. Like with the graph, it will take practice to recognize domain restrictions from a formula. Stay tuned. Exercise B. What is the domain of the parabola f of x equals x squared? What's its range? Let's solve this on the next slide. Alright, so on this slide, we have drawn out the graph. So what's the domain? Well, because this line goes all the way that way forever, and this line goes all the way that way forever, all real numbers on the x-axis are going to be in the domain. So x belongs to all real numbers. What's the range? Well, we have all the values from 0 up to infinity. However, there are no y values that are less than 0. So f of x, the y value, belongs to 0, infinity, where we have a bracket here because 0 is a possible y value, and we have a parentheses there because this goes on to infinity, and whenever we have infinity, we use parentheses. The graph of the squaring function paints the picture. Exercise C. What's the domain of a of x equals the absolute value of x? What's the range? Let's solve this on the next slide. Here's the graph of the absolute value function, and that definitely paints the picture. The domain, because that line goes that way forever, this line goes that way forever, the domain is all x values, all real numbers. The range is, once again, going to be all numbers greater than 0, because if we project this graph onto the y-axis, you'll see that every number between 0 and infinity is included in the range. However, there are no y values below 0, so we have that the range is 0 to infinity.